Frankie had always been close to his father, Joe, a successful businessman in Manhattan. Life had been smooth for Frankie until his father introduced him to Poppy, his new girlfriend. Poppy, a charming and elegant woman in her late 30s, was everything Frankie could dream of in a woman. He couldn't help but feel a secret attraction towards her, even though she was dating his father. Poppy, aware of the awkward situation, made a conscious effort to be friendly and supportive towards Frankie. She often invited him to join them on their dates, and they would share conversations about books, movies, and their mutual love for art. Frankie couldn't help but feel a strong connection with her, but he knew he had to keep his feelings in check. Frankie had known Poppy for a few years now since she started dating his dad, Joe. Over that time, his feelings had grown into something complicated, something more than just liking her as his dad's girlfriend. Poppy was always kind to him. She had a warm smile, had this persevering, quiet patience to her personality, and a softness in her voice that made him feel seen and heard. But Frankie wanted more than just kindness. He wanted to be someone special in her world, too. He always admired how his dad could attract such a beautiful woman that he too wanted just as badly. One crisp autumn afternoon, Poppy had a shopping spree planned on Fifth Avenue. Frankie was home for the weekend, so Poppy invited Frankie to go shopping with her. "We need to get to that boutique on Fifth Avenue before it closes," she said, excitement shining in her eyes. She wanted to buy an expensive designer purse before the store closed in the next hour. "We can make it if we hurry, Frankie," Poppy said quickly. They arrived at the station, but the train was packed full of people. It was standing room only, and everyone's bodies were closely packed inside. Poppy grabbed Frankie's hand gently but firmly. "This train will get us there on time before the store closes. We have to squeeze in." Frankie was surprised at the softness in Poppy's hand as she firmly gripped onto his fingers. The doors slid open, and a rush of passengers spilled inside. Poppy tugged Frankie's hand, guiding him forward. Frankie felt the crowd pressing around him. The close warmth of strangers' bodies was dividing him and Poppy. Frankie could feel Poppy's soft fingers slipping away from his own hands. Frankie looked at Poppy and smiled nervously. He could feel his heart beat faster, probably from the crush, and sheer excitement Frankie felt in his body to be able to hold Poppy's hand for so long. He had been looking forward to this day for so long that the thrill of being with her was enough to keep him up for the last several days. Poppy could feel Frankie's fingers slowly slipping away, yet she was still just as determined to make it onto this train. She urgently tugged at Frankie's hand and interlaced her fingers harder into his sweaty palms. Poppy took one step onto the crowded train and yanked Frankie's hand as hard as she could to pull him through the crowd of strangers and onto the train. When she pulled, she must have pulled a little too hard. In the process, he stumbled, falling into her chest, his face landing in the middle of her cleavage. Poppy blinked to clear her eyes at the sight of what had just occurred. Did Frankie make it on the train? As Frankie landed in the middle of Poppy's shirt, a button came undone from the weight of Frankie's body hitting her chest. That was when Poppy realized what had just happened. Poppy places her hand on her chest and quickly forces the button closed again on her shirt. "Frankie, are you in there?" Poppy whispers to her cleavage as she looks around to see if anyone notices. "I must look like a crazy lady talking to myself," Poppy thinks to herself. Embarrassed and flustered, Poppy couldn't help but feel guilty for the accident. She was determined to make it to the store before closing time, so she tried to put the incident behind her and focus on their shopping trip. Frankie's heart pounded in his chest as he felt Poppy's soft skin against his face. He closed his eyes, trying to ignore the strange and exhilarating sensation as to not get overwhelmed too quickly at the excitement he was currently feeling in his pants. Frankie started crawling around, exploring all the beauty he had just fallen upon. They arrived at the boutique just in time. Once inside, Poppy was able to buy the designer purse she had been eyeing, all the while Frankie was also eyeing something he had wanted for so long. Frankie felt like he was in a canyon of immeasurable softness. He landed in the warm, yielding valley formed by the curve of Poppy's breast, nestled precisely where her shirt gaped, just above the subtle swell of her cleavage. Frankie was in an almost transcendent awe. He was enveloped in the one part of Poppy he had been so curious about. The air was thick with Poppy's unique scent of her skin, mixed with traces of the vanilla lotion she had applied to her body after showering that morning. Frankie inhaled the warm, clean, subtly human aroma that he found intoxicating. The scent pressed in on him. He was truly stuck, wedged in the plush canyon. The fabric of her worn cotton shirt was a soft veil above him, and the warmth of her skin consumed him. Poppy was now headed back to the train station, knowing that Frankie was still inside of her shirt somewhere. As they waited for their train, Poppy's mind was racing, trying to figure out how to address the earlier incident to Frankie's father. She knew she had to be honest with Joe, but she wasn't sure how to do it. When they boarded the train, Poppy decided to take a deep breath and confront the situation. She leaned towards Frankie and whispered, "I'm really sorry about what happened earlier. I didn't mean to pull you so hard. I hope you're not too upset that I made you so tiny." Frankie, taken aback by Poppy's honesty, paused for a moment to contain his excitement at what had just happened. Pretending to be more frightened than excited at the situation, Frankie responded, "It's okay, Poppy. I understand it was an accident. I don't want you to feel guilty about it. I don't mind waiting here until you get home." Poppy breathed a sigh of relief, grateful for Frankie's understanding. As they continued their journey home, Frankie's journey inside of Poppy was just beginning. Frankie lay for a long moment, synchronizing his breathing with the rhythmic rise and fall of her chest. The pressure was a comforting embrace, a profound sense of being held between two mountains of soft, squishy love balls. The tremor of her heartbeat made him want to climb deeper inside of her. Every tiny hair on his minuscule body stood on end from an electrifying surge of sensation. The sheer scale of her skin was staggering. It wasn't just a flat surface, it was a landscape of rolling hills and valleys. Her pores looked like microscopic craters. He knew what they were, though they looked like moonscapes to him. He crawled through the forest of fine hair that only he could see. He reached out a hand, his fingers sinking into the incredible softness, the warmth seeping into his very core. It was supple, yet firm beneath at the same time. He was here, in the epicenter of his crush, in a place no one else had ever, or could ever, experience quite like this. It was then he had realized there was an entire world waiting for him to explore. He knew he had to work quickly, as the train ride home was not going to last forever. He knew eventually he had to leave this beautiful place. He pushed himself up, clambering over the impossibly soft peaks of Poppy's chest. The light dimming slightly as Poppy shifted, casting him into deeper shadow, only to brighten again as she leaned back. The air created a gentle breeze with each of Poppy's movements, carrying the full spectrum of her scent. He inhaled deeply, trying to commit every note to memory, a scent that was now inextricably linked to this overwhelming sense of intimacy. Then he felt it, a faint dampness of individual droplets scattered across the landscape. He touched one, a droplet of moisture clinging to a single strand of downy hair. It was cool, despite the warmth of her skin. He brought his finger to his nose. The smell was different. It was sharper but not unpleasant. Frankie still sniffed it all in. It was a clean, tangy note, blended with Poppy's inherent warmth. He was smelling her sweat, and for some reason, it made his heart hammer even faster. His pants getting tighter. It was so real. He was so close to Poppy that he was able to lick the sweat droplets off of each hair follicle on her body. The train must be getting warm with all the people on it, that it was causing Poppy to sweat profusely, Frankie thought. But in reality, Poppy was becoming more nervous by the minute, contemplating what to say to her boyfriend, Joe, about what had happened to his son Frankie during their shopping adventure. A river of sweat dripped down her cleavage before soaking into her cotton shirt. Frankie saw more of them now, tiny, iridescent spheres clinging to the valley walls, collecting at the bottom. He carefully navigated around the sweat droplets as he explored more of her chest, sometimes brushing against them, feeling the cool sensation on his skin, a stark contrast to the warmth of her body. He imagined Poppy oblivious, going about her day, completely unaware of the miniature adventure Frankie was having between the damp contours of her chest. The thought sent a rush of forbidden excitement through him as he intertwined his bodily fluids into the stream of sweat on her chest. Frankie yearned to explore more. He began to climb, pulling himself up miniature ridges formed by the slight creasing of her skin, sliding down gentle slopes. Frankie would press against each hair and slide against each smooth skin surface. The texture of her skin varied. Some areas were smoother, while others had a finer grain. He made his path further downward, propelled by an instinctual curiosity of his crush on Poppy. He descended into the tightest part of the cleavage. Here, the warmth was more intense, the air heavier with her subtle scent. The rise and fall of her chest was more pronounced here. The tang of the sweat was stronger here, too, an earthy, intimate scent that filled his tiny lungs. It was strangely comforting. It was a raw, unvarnished piece of Poppy that not even his father has explored of hers. He walked through more fine, barely visible hairs, with their tips tickling his face. The terrain began to change. The skin here was slightly different, a subtle change in color, a deeper, roseate hue. It was smoother, softer even, and held a peculiar, alluring elasticity. His heart pounded with anticipation. He knew, instinctively, what he was approaching. He hauled himself over a gentle rise, and there it was. Not one, but two. They stood like twin peaks, small, perfectly formed mounds of flesh, rising from the rose-colored plains. His breath caught in his throat. These were the nipples. He had imagined them, certainly, but the reality was far more profound. He scrambled towards the nearest one. The skin on the areola was a marvel of texture, slightly coarser, with tiny, almost imperceptible bumps. The color was a rich, warm brown, deepening towards the center. He dragged himself across its surface, feeling the subtle ridging, the slightly raised texture that was so different from the rest of her chest. Then he reached the summit. The nipple itself was a revelation. He pressed his tiny hand against it, feeling its peculiar elasticity, its warmth. It was sensitive. He wondered if Poppy could feel him there. He could feel the subtle changes in its firmness as Poppy shifted, or perhaps even as she just breathed. He pressed his face against it and inhaled deeply. The scent here was a concentration of all the poppiness he had encountered. The clean warmth, the faint vanilla, the earthy tang of sweat, all distilled into a singular, intoxicating aroma. It was the scent of pure, unadulterated poppy, and it filled him with a sense of wonder and adoration. He perched on the edge of the nipple, occasionally pressing against it, feeling its unique responsiveness. His crush, once a distant, admiring ache, had transformed into an overwhelming, embodied experience. He was literally nestled in the warmth of her affection, in the parts of her that he wanted to see and touch the most. A wave of excitement washed over him. It wasn't just the thrill of forbidden exploration, though that was certainly there. It was the intimacy of it all. He, Frankie, the son of Poppy's lover, was experiencing Poppy in a way no one else ever could. He knew the precise texture of her skin, the intimate tang of her sweat, the softness of her cleavage, and now, the incredible peak of her nipples. When they arrived at their home train stop, Poppy and Frankie exited the train, only to find that Joe was not home yet. Poppy was relieved. Poppy suggested that they wait for him in the living room, but Frankie was not ready to leave Poppy's body yet. So he convinced Poppy to take a walk around the block to help ease her mind and find a solution to restore Frankie back to normal size. As Poppy took a lap around the block, Frankie was suspended between awe and infatuation. The heartbeat of his giantess made him want to explore her more deeply. He wanted to get inside of her. Frankie circled around Poppy's left nipple before finding what appeared to be a minuscule indentation, almost imperceptible to the naked eye, but to him, it was a promising entrance. A flutter of excitement coursed through him. This was it. This was an intimacy few would ever experience. He took a deep, excited breath and crawled inside. The entrance was a warm, soft gateway. He squeezed and wiggled until he was inside. There was a faint light that filtered through the skin. The walls of the inside of her chest were incredibly soft, almost spongy. Her skin pulsed with the ebb and flow of her blood. Frankie pressed his palms against the muscular contractions as Poppy moved, oblivious to his touch within her. The excitement was overwhelming, a giddy rush of pure wonder. He was truly inside her, something he had only been able to fantasize about for years before this moment. He didn't know how he knew where to go next, so he followed the beating of her heart until he made his way onto her heart. He was pressed against the powerful muscle that gave his crusher life force. Each contraction lifted him and then gently lowered him. The sound was deafening to his tiny ears. He could feel the sheer force of it, the incredible power that propelled her blood and kept her alive. He could feel when she took a deep breath. This was the seat of her emotions and of her love. He was sitting on the core of her being. But the journey wasn't over. A different kind of curiosity began to stir within Frankie's mind. From her heart, he sensed another, different kind of activity happening inside her body. It was faint, slow gurgles and powerful contractions emanating from deeper within her. Frankie got excited. He needed to explore deeper. He found himself moving through a looser, more open space. Frankie could smell the aroma of Poppy's digestion. Frankie reached her stomach. Her stomach walls were gently rippling. Muffled sloshing sounds filled the air, punctuated by deep, resonant gurgles and low, powerful belly groans. Frankie stepped into the stomach liquid churn beneath him. He pressed his tiny self against her stomach walls to feel its texture. It was so smooth, he rubbed his whole body onto its wet, smooth surface. And then the contractions began. Slowly at first, a gentle tremor, then building in intensity, a massive, powerful squeeze that rippled across the entire wall. Unlike the heart sounds, these were slow and deliberate movements. He could feel the immense power of her digestion system working. He watched the various things Poppy ate today being broken down and transformed into sloshing liquid inside her stomach. He crawled along the stomach wall as he heard the churning of liquids and the bubbling sounds of her digestive system at work. The excitement here was different from the awe of the heart or the intimacy of seeing her nipple. He was witnessing the mundane miracles of her existence from the inside out. And so, Frankie got excited again. Frankie lay nestled against the pulsating stomach wall, exhausted. His senses had been overwhelmed with many pleasures within Poppy. He knew her now, in a way no one ever could. He didn't know how he would get out, or if he even wanted to. For now, he was content to be lost in the extraordinary world of Poppy's warmth. Frankie realizes that his time inside Poppy is coming to an end. He quickly searches for an exit route and sees a glimmer of light coming from Poppy's belly button. He starts to make his way towards the bright light. Frankie climbed carefully toward it. Frankie tries to stretch her belly button wide enough to force his way through. Poppy clutches her stomach and starts laughing. Something inside her was crawling near her navel, and it tickled. But as he wriggled closer, the ticklish sensation overwhelmed Poppy. She gasped, then hiccuped, then let out an enormous, involuntary burp. And in that instant, a pressure burst forth so strongly it caused Frankie to shoot out of her mouth like a slingshot, spiraling through the air. The pressure was intense. Frankie landed across the street. "Frankie, you're okay," Poppy said, as she ran to him and held his head on her bosom. Frankie was shocked she could see him. Frankie was full-sized again. Both of them stared at each other in stunned silence. Frankie could feel the same warmth from her chest as he felt earlier that day, this time as a full-size version of himself. Just then, the sound of keys jingling at the front door jolted them into motion. "Dad's home!" Frankie yelped. The two scrambled to their feet, wiping off the dirt from Frankie's clothes. They bolted around the side of the house and slipped in through the back door. When Joe walked in, dropping his keys into the bowl and sighing like he'd had a long day, he found them both seated at the table, calm and casual, pretending to read a recipe magazine and discuss dinner. "Hey," Joe said, giving Poppy a kiss on the cheek. "Everything go okay today?" Poppy smiled. "Oh, just a normal day in the city." Frankie smirked. still remembering the scent of Poppy's breasts. Nothing weird at all.